Hello, my lovely humans. Welcome back to my channel. It's FCA. We're going to talk about the Diddy trial outcome. And there is one juror who was an alternate who came forward just recently. He was the only one I was able to find of any jurors who had come forward to talk about the case. So we're going to talk about what happened and the charges, the verdicts, how they got to the verdicts, and just going down the line of all that stuff, keeping in mind that I'm an outside juror. I don't have any professional legalese. I always say that you don't have to be a professional baker to understand how to bake, so that is what I'm going to go with. I will link everything as I explain in summary and recap. These are all the verdicts that have come forward. So let's get into the Diddy trial outcome. So me, and I'm sure yourselves and other people, were at first outraged finding out that most of the charges that Diddy was facing, he was found not guilty on. Now, before we get too excited about that, we need to take a step back and let's look at what was happening. Because if you're sitting there going, what about all those people, all those witnesses, all those people who came forward, all the everything that was going on? Yes, it's true. But somebody who is a plaintiff who's bringing an accusation, they get put into charges. Every single accusation is not its own individual charge. And when it comes to, this is where people get frustrated with the law, because there's a difference between what is legal, like what the law allows for, and morality. They don't always line up and end up on the same page. And that's very frustrating to people. When we saw that horrific video of Cassie at the hotel getting brutalized by Diddy, and people are like, no, he's a monster, and all these other people have come forward. How do all of these people, 200 and something people, come forward and say very similar stories? Because every single accusation, every single plaintiff, every single accuser is A, not a witness, and B, they don't have their own individual charges. The only things that he was charged with, okay, he only had 5 charges, not 200 and something from all of the accusations of people. Those weren't all charges. He only had 5. 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, which means he was being charged with being a part of basically a mob organization or a criminal organization, so that he was making money illegally in a group effort setting, illegal or illicit business. So that's the racketeering, also known as the RICO charge. He had 1 count of that. Then there was sex trafficking by force, where there were 2 counts against Cassie Ventura and against Jane. That she did not get her real name put out there. She was just referred to as Jane, another ex-girlfriend of Diddy's. And then 2 counts of transportation for prostitution. So sex trafficking in this case is described as using force, fraud, or coercion to exploit women. So that means that you are using people, forcing them into sexual situations, which you will have financial gain. And the RICO, the racketeering, and the sex trafficking were interlinked together. It was that the racketeering organization was a sex traffic organization. That is what the prosecution was bringing as charges against him for. And then there was transportation to prostitution. This is where individuals were either going from a place where it's illegal, or going from a place where it is legal to some place where it is illegal, to engage in sexual activity with a financial transaction involved. So there is intent to take person to a spot for prostituting. That is the illegal crime. There were 2 counts of that. So 5 counts in total. Racketeering, then the sex trafficking, and then transportation for prostitution. So keeping that in mind, that we don't have a ton of, we don't have 200 counts coming out. And yes, the video of Cassie was set forward. But let us keep in mind that Cassie already settled her case. She's not a plaintiff in this case. She was brought forward as a witness. It was just that under the charges, she was one of the main people accused of being trafficked and of engaging in prostitution transportation. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, explaining the actual charges and how every accusation is not a charge. I know I said that multiple times, but it's because it's important. Then we have the outcomes. So what happened with the jury trial? Well, the verdict came back not guilty for racketeering, and the 2 counts of sex trafficking were also found not guilty. Again, because they were interlinked, that sex trafficking was a part of the racketeering. If you don't find racketeering, then it's hard to find the sex trafficking. If you don't find the sex trafficking, how do you find for the racketeering? So those 2 counts being found not guilty, not surprising. It was either going to be they were all guilty or there were going to be 2 not guilties. And what happened here was there were 2 counts of transportation for prostitution that they were found to be guilty. So if we want to talk to the only juror who came forward, who is named George in the USA Today article, again, everything will be linked below. If you don't believe me, don't want to take my word for it, you can check it all out for yourself. They had said that there was insufficient evidence for racketeering and sex trafficking, that there wasn't anything to prove that Diddy was running a mob organization, essentially, that they didn't see that. And the racketeering conspiracy is very interesting in the sense of maybe it seemed like a reach for the government, like really, because the dude had some weird personal habits. We're gonna say that it's a mob organization, that it's a criminal organization. Seems sus. Jurors do not like when the government grasps for straws to make a charge. It doesn't sit well with them. And then, because there was no organization, as I said before, there wasn't going to be enough evidence for the sex trafficking, because according to George, that while he found Jane and Cassie to be mostly credible, he said that Cassie was more credible, very credible, and that even though he believed Jane, some of the stuff, especially about her 2024 incident with Diddy, didn't seem to add up. Some things seemed off for him, and that he thought that the sex trafficking was just a takedown of force, and so was the racketeering charges. And they said that they were always, at least he was always dubious about the racketeering charge to begin with. So when you already have a jury that's sus of a charge, it's taking that much more to get a charge, to get a verdict in that favor. He said that because of the text messages brought from the defense, that it seemed to him, and it seems to the other jurors, that the women were not forced or coerced. Even though they said they felt coerced, the jury was not convinced that they were forced or coerced at the time, that they seemed like they were willing participants. Willing or not, transportation for prostitution is still a crime, and that they did have that. George also talked about when they showed the freak-off videos, he said they were kind of tame compared to what people were expecting. He goes, yeah, there was sex, but there was mostly just like a lot of oil rubbing and then just sex. Nothing like super crazy the way people were suggesting. So I don't know if that's downplaying. USA Today described it as downplaying, but maybe he just legitimately didn't see the freak-off videos as being that weird. It was baby oil, surprise, and sex. All right. So, speaking of the charges, if you're still wondering about the abuse, etc., there were no charges for that. Keep in mind, there were no charges for domestic battery, for domestic violence, or for assault, domestic assault, assault and battery. There were no drug paraphernalia things coming up here. So the stuff related to them being drugged or given drug, there was no drug trafficking. There was no illegal substance distribution. None of those things were charges in this case. So that doesn't mean that people weren't abused or people weren't hurt or hit. And I'm confused by that, because if you see somebody getting beaten up and stomped on, how do you not describe what they could be doing as force or being coerced? Like, yeah, I'm going to do what you say because I'm afraid of you. Again, just how they legally brought it up, and they said that the text messages for George is what really did it for him in his notes. He said that because there were exchanges that showed the women being willing, agreeing to meetups, saying things that they were excited about stuff or happy to do it, can't wait, etc., that made it seem like they were willing participants. And whether they regretted those experiences or they were on drugs when they said them was not really a part of the legal part of it. It was just, were they willing or were they not to do those things? So the transportation is not a light charge, by the way. Do not think that Diddy got off scot-free. He did not. He is still facing 2 decades, 20 years of prison if served consecutively. Consecutively means you serve one sentence and then another sentence begins. Things that happen at the same time are concurrently, which means if you get charged with 10 years for this and 10 years for this, 10 years goes by for both of those. But each one carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. And keep in mind that Diddy is 55 years old, going on 56. So if he were to get the maximum sentence of 20 years, he's not getting out anytime soon. Also keeping in mind that a life sentence is 25 years. So if you've ever read something, it's like, how does somebody have multiple life sentences? 25 years is considered a life sentence in most states and jurisdictions. It's not actually until you expire in life. So if he gets that, he's going to be 70 plus years old if he were to get out and not pass away in prison. Okay. He was also denied bail. His defense team had wanted him out on bail from the verdict until October 3rd of 2025. That is when he is going to be sentenced. I honestly do not see him getting 20 years total. I think he might get about 8 to 10 years total. So about 5 years or so, 4 to 5 years for each count. They will most likely be consecutive rather than concurrent, but there is no 100% guarantee in that. The lawyers will argue it out, fight it out, and the judge will come to a determination. But yeah, so there is still a very high risk, of which again, even if he does get 10 years that he's put away for, he's still going to be 65 years old before he gets out. And in that 10 years, he's not going to be making record deals. Sometimes there are things put on prisoners where they are not allowed to profit from their imprisonment. They are not allowed to sell things to make money from themselves. So, you do still have to keep that in mind. So is it annoying that we have this known monstrous person who's found not guilty? Yes, but he was not found guilty on some of the more monsterizing things. And even though the sex trafficking one is annoying, I think when it is the thing being linked and connected to the racketeering, it makes sense. Still frustrating, but find solace in the fact that he is getting charged. He is getting a substantial sentence. And I could be surprised, maybe the judge is like, you know what? Just go away forever. 20 years total. He could. I don't think that he will. But that is what we have for the Diddy trials. Again, I will link everything that I got the information from, including the USA Today article with the alternate who came forward. If I find any more jurors that have come forward before I put this up, I will also link them towards the bottom with a note that there was additional things. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.